Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure humulite. Trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest humulite reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth humulite. Learn more from mine to market by visiting blackearth.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host on this Friday, October 17th, Lyndsey Smith. Thank you for joining us here on the show. We've got a great show coming up for you. We've got Marvin Slingerland. He's the Senior Vice President, that's important, of Agriculture for MMP. He'll be joining us, as well as Kelvin Heppner, of course, with RealAgriculture for the Issues panel. Don't worry, Sean Haney will be back next week. A quick note, there is no bonus on the podcast today, but we promise very much there will be next week, and maybe you'll even get one on Monday's show. So I'll be hosting Agronomic Monday, of course. So check us out then. I did want to just quickly send a shout out so you can get it on your calendar. Monday evening on The Agronomist, 8 p.m. Eastern, that's 6 p.m. in Saskatchewan or Alberta. Wheat Pete is going to host The Agronomist, and he's going to be talking about how soil behaves, especially in dry years, with Dr. Dave Hooker from the University of Guelph Ridgetown and Dr. Jeff Shano from the University of Saskatchewan. So just an all-star lineup. Check it out Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Go to our YouTube. Go to realagriculture.com/agronomists. I can't wait. And it'll be nice to have a Monday off, to be honest. Okay. On today's show, though, super important, because that's what you're here for, right? We've got lots to unpack. We're going to talk about who can own farmland, and specifically what Saskatchewan is doing to make that decision for some people. We're going to talk about news we got on India and China this week, and our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Anita Anand, heading out on a whirlwind tour. Minister McDonald, our Ag Minister, was in Mexico as well, so we've got that to tackle. Want to talk about tariffs, of course, and we're going to talk about the auto sector. And I'll ask the question, I mean, should we just recognize the auto sector probably won't stick around as long as Trump is in power, and maybe we have to let it go? I know, it's controversial. All right, stick around after the break. I've got Marvin and Kelvin joining me for the Issues panel. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM.
Time for a product spotlight, joined right now by Mark Alberts, who's the Senior Brand Manager for Invigor. Walk us through this Invigor Book and Buy.
Really that opportunity for farmers and retailers that are looking to plan ahead, make their decisions for next year, and getting rewarded for doing so by November 14th, 2025.
Which Invigor hybrids are eligible?
Eligible Invigor hybrids are going to vary by province. Growers, keep in mind where you're located, and please search out invigorbookandbuy.ca for which Invigor hybrids are going to be right for you. So number one, growers, visit invigorbookandbuy.ca and figure out which eligible hybrids in the lineup are going to fit. Number two, visit your retail by November 14th, 2025 and book your intentions. Number three, go back to that same retail and purchase your Invigor hybrids in 2026 when you're ready to go, and you'll be eligible for a $30 per bag rebate that would get paid back to you in the fall of 2026. Just a quick plug for invigorresults.ca. If you're looking for some of those local proof points closest to your farm of which hybrids in the Invigor lineup might have a good fit.
Anniversaries are a time of reflection, celebration, and connection. 10 years ago, G3 set out with a vision to build something better for Canadian grain farmers. And you joined us on that journey to launch a new national network. Thank you for the relationships that made it possible. A decade of growth, a decade of connections, and more in decades to come. Connect with your farm business representative or find your closest elevator at g3smarter.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for this Friday, Lyndsey Smith, and it is time for the Issues panel. Joining me now, I've got Kelvin Heppner with RealAgriculture out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how goes it?
Doing well here, Lyndsey. The Blue Jays won again last night, so they're back to having home field advantage in this best of three now, I guess, to make it to the World Series. Momentum's back on the side.
Okay. Are you very pleased? Like, is this a very good October week?
It's quite the roller coaster this week. It looked like the Blue Jays' bats had dried up and they'd completely lost all the mojo they had against the Yankees. And yeah, so no, I'm a big Blue Jays fan here. I grew up listening to the Blue Jays on the radio, so to talk about farming, I'd say, and so kind of full. It all ties together with talking about farming on the radio today.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is pretty cool. And they got to keep it interesting, Kelvin. You can't just no one's going to sweep these things. Like, there has to be some drama. So anyway, we'll see where it goes. Yeah. Super exciting. Okay. Also joining us today, Marvin Slingerland. He's the Senior Vice President for Agriculture for MNP. Marvin, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Lyndsey. And, our firm's having our AGM in Toronto next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So hopefully there'll be celebrations in downtown Toronto as well if baseball series continues. So
yes, some parades maybe. Some parades.
And 10 years ago, wasn't the MNP ad on the outfield fence in some of those big moments 10 years ago when the Blue Jays lost?
10 years ago, it was there. You bet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So coming full circle. So we'll see. Marvin, you'll have to let us know how that goes. We expect pictures, video, and live tweets from the action.
You bet.
There you go. All right. Okay. So definitely a full week, a lot going on the global stage. And of course, also right here at home. We've got a lot to talk about today. Let's start with, Kelvin, maybe I'll start with you to sort of set us up here. There's a lot to discuss. Since last week, because I think, we got some news late last week and then in through this week, who can own Saskatchewan farmland has been sort of a topic of interest, and the Saskatchewan government's been putting out a couple press releases on it. So catch us up on what the news is, and then maybe we'll break it down on what it all means.
Well, the Saskatchewan government has launched kind of a review process. They created a committee earlier this month to look at the rules around farmland ownership in the province. Saskatchewan does have some of the strictest rules in terms of needing to be a Canadian citizen to own land. And this week, they passed a regulatory amendment that closes a loophole that allowed the Canada Pension Plan to still own farmland. So back in 2015, the Saskatchewan government updated its legislation around farmland ownership rules. At the time, the CPP Investment Board owned, I think it was 167,000 acres of farmland in the province. And so they created this exemption. Pension plans weren't allowed to own farmland in Saskatchewan, but they allowed the CPP they created an exemption for the CPP. And since then, the pension plan that all working Canadians contribute to has since divested those acres in Saskatchewan. And so now, as part of this update, I guess, the agriculture minister this week passed this regulatory amendment. So the CPP can no longer own farmland in Saskatchewan. And again, this review committee is expected to complete its report with a bunch of recommendations to the province by the end of this year. So yeah, I'd say it's a topic that is always a hot topic in Saskatchewan and controversial in terms of who should be allowed to own, who you should be allowed to sell to if you do own land. And it looks like we're going to have more of that discussion here over the winter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Marvin, let's back up a step. What, from an agnostic sort of standpoint, what does it mean when, say, an investor like a pension plan starts buying or does own a lot of farmland? What kind of dynamic can that create sort of at a regional level?
Yeah, well, there could be a few things that happen, Lyndsey. Like one, you could potentially drive up prices. Like if a large farm is exited, the pool of buyers is quite small. So if you have a large corporate farm that wants to exit, an investment fund is an attractive alternative for somebody to sell to in a large block. It does drive up prices. It does increase the opportunity also for people to rent land. So, right. And we've had many successful clients over the years that have had really good rental agreements with whether it's a pension fund or a retired farmer. And rented land is a good way for young farmers to get in as well. I can sort of see where Saskatchewan's going. It is an attractive place to invest, and I think historically, farmland has always been a little bit underpriced in Saskatchewan. I think that's why it's attracted the attention of investment funds.
So, Kelvin, when you think about it, there's sort of two sides to this, right? There's exactly that. It can increase the cost of land, which if you're trying to buy, not ideal. But if you own land in the area, maybe not such a bad thing. And as Marvin points out, having an owner that doesn't plan on farming it could create opportunity. How do we make that balance though, Kelvin? Because obviously there are a lot of people that necessarily don't want to see a big buyer come in and take up land.
Yeah, this is what the government now or policymakers have to kind of try to figure out what that balance is. And I think in some ways it's at a time when we're potentially turning into a downturn, or we are turning into a downturn in the agriculture economy. There are analysts out there. Trent Clarenbach in Saskatoon has received a fair bit of attention this summer and fall about his analysis, saying that Saskatchewan farmland values are about to drop based on technical analysis. And what happens then if you take out potential investors or potential buyers out of the market, that could further exacerbate a decline in farmland values, which if you're somebody who owns farmland and is counting on that as part of your retirement plan and the wealth that you've accumulated over your farming career, you don't want farmland values to drop substantially either in many cases. So there's this balancing act. In some ways, this provincial government here or policymakers need to project what where the direction they think the ag economy is headed here. If you all of a sudden don't want to further exacerbate a decline in farmland values, I'm not sure that we are actually on the precipice of that. There is still, Marvin alluded to, there's a small pool of buyers, but I think there's still a fairly strong pool of buyers for most land in most cases. But if there's a tipping point at some point, all of a sudden you don't want to have cut off a whole bunch of potential buyers of land and just have the floor fall out, which I again think there's a really small chance of that happening, but that is something that has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and you raised a good point, Kelvin. Timon could be interesting on this, because if you look at where commodity prices have gone this year, we saw in 2024, over 30% of Saskatchewan producers had a agri-stability claim. We expect the same for 2025, if not higher. So things are getting tighter in Saskatchewan, and who knows where farmland values could go, but signs are pointing where it'll likely pause and hold steady, if not maybe slight drops in some areas.
The flip side, or in addition to that, Marvin, it's also a liquidity question, right? Like if you've got farmers that are in a position where it's like, and maybe they're at an age where they're like, you know what, it is time to retire. We're in for a couple hard years, and let's face it, for most farmers, the land base is their largest investment to fund their retirement. What potentially do added rules like this that, really limit who can buy farmland, what can that potentially do for liquidity?
Yeah, it could put a pause on it. I think it's more the uncertainty. Like if somebody was counting on something, it's the uncertainty of what the next step is. And I think there's still enough buyers in Canada. And I think everybody will still be fine, but it's, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out in the next year.
And if we're in for a time of consolidation as well, as farms get bigger, they have to look for different sources of financing and capital. And this is where you get into the nitty gritty of these rules as to whose name is actually on the farmland title versus where that funding came from, that type of thing, in terms of behind the scenes investors and who those who's supplying the equity behind the scenes type of thing. That's where I think the Saskatchewan government has its hands full here in terms of trying to navigate the situation, and all governments across North America.
Yeah, I think at like first blush, you're like, oh, of course, only Canadians should own farmland, or whatever, right? But then you have to start asking exactly those questions, right? It's like, okay, well, who can, who can't, where, how, what does an ownership agreement have to look like? Like those sorts of things. I mean, there are always ways around things as well.
Yeah.
So Marvin, go ahead. You have one more point.
Yeah. The thing I'm interested in is Saskatchewan had a fast track immigration program for people looking to invest in Saskatchewan. And we saw a lot of European farmers actually divest in Europe and move to Saskatchewan to start farming. And I'm curious how these rules would impact that decision for them, because a lot of times what we would see is they would buy farmland before actually immigrating here.
Right.
So obviously, hopefully there's exemptions and stuff for cases like that where people are moving. And it was an attractive place for Europeans to move to. So,
as Kelvin says, it's they've got their hands full on this one.
Yeah.
So we'll be watching how this committee, so the committee being struck, and then how they unpack this and the report that comes out, and what rules, I guess, eventually come out from this. Okay, let's take a quick break here on RealAg Radio, and we'll be back with more right after this.
For the upcoming growing season, take advantage of Rhizazor.
Rhizazor performance has been proven on hundreds of on-farm trials, which you can view at fosssolutions.com. Additionally, growers can take advantage of the Rhizazor Grower Guarantee Program. This program protects growers' revenue up to $40 per acre if their yields don't match their 10-year APH.
Discover the impact. Download the Rhizazor Performance Report to see how Rhizazorb is transforming nutrient efficiency and driving results in the field.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. With your canola in the bin, it's time to lock up savings for next year's season. Act now and save up to $75 per bag on DeKalb canola with Harvest Rewards, but only until October 31st. Visit DeKalbRewards.ca for details. Okay, I didn't do it off the hop, but we'll do it now. Kelvin, I took my victory lap last week on the RealAg hockey pool, because I know how these hockey pools go. And sure enough, I went from 35th to I'm somewhere in the 170s to 190s now. How's your team doing?
I checked this morning. I think I'm in the 70s. So I've climbed a bit the last week, but trending in the right direction. But
yeah,
still
I'm going the wrong way.
Still a ways from the top.
Yeah, and I also I've already got some injured players, so that's exciting as well. Brady Tkachuk went down.
What is your team name, by the way? I hadn't.
It should be easy enough to guess, but I will say that leading the standings, and thank you to Cantera Seeds and Alliance Seed for sponsoring the RealAg hockey pool. Toppenish Tom, for those of you who know the farming game, is leading with 127 points. I am the Loudy Loud Loudies. Which is easy enough to find. There are some good ones, let me tell you. So, and anyway, what's your team, Kelvin? Should I guess? I should go through them and see if I can guess.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, all right. Time right not right now. Not while we're on the radio show, but I'll go check later. Marvin missed the deadline, so we will just we'll pretend that you picked a great team, Marvin.
My team would have been in the top 10 for sure.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. How was your real team doing in real life?
A little bit off to a shaky start, I think, but finish strong. Always finish strong.
Finish strong. That's what we're going to focus on. Okay. Sounds good. All right. So thank you, of course, everyone who is participating. And anytime you want to trash talk, send it to Kelvin. K. Heppner at RealAgriculture.com. Okay, there you go. All right. Switching gears. It was a busy week on the news front internationally, Kelvin. We did get We haven't actually covered a lot of it on realag.com, so we need to get on that today. Minister McDonald did get back from a trip from Mexico, but bigger news, and before that at least, from an export side, we had Anita Anand met actually with officials in India. I'll be honest, Kelvin, I was a little surprised. I didn't know this was happening, but it feels like we've made like a leap forward in diplomatic or political relationships here.
Yeah, in many ways back to normal after all the diplomats from both countries got pulled out about a year ago, and now they've reestablished all those positions. It sounds like, and the relationship back on in terms of trying to find ways of enhancing trade and enhancing cooperation between Canada and India. And of course, this is part of Canada's strategy to diversify, or effort to try to diversify away from being so independent or dependent on the U.S. market. So, yeah, Anita Anand in India to start the week, and she met with Modi and some of the other high-ranking officials there, and seemed like things went well. Then I believe she was in Singapore, and now at the end of the week she's in Beijing in China, meeting with her the foreign affairs counterpart there, and so seems like there's definitely an effort by the Canadian government to shift the pendulum back to friendly relations with these countries that Canada's had a lot of challenges with over the last couple of years.
So, Marvin, when you see, meetings like this, how important is it that we are actually meeting with, not just on the fringes, we're meeting with, major officials, sometimes leadership of these countries? How important is that from the perspective of getting some of the trade back going, or keeping it going in the case of India?
I think it's very important. And I think a lot of people don't realize how important this trade deal is with India, or trade relations with India is. If you look at India, they have the largest global population, and it is a major ag producer itself, but it cannot keep up to produce enough food to feed their population. So it's a huge opportunity for Canadian plant protein producers to continue to export. And if you look at India, like Saskatchewan is the largest exporter of potash to India, so it's super important on that front. And I think it's over 1 million metric ton of potash to India per year. So that's huge. And what we also hear is India is super interested in some of the Canadian agriculture technology as well. So I think there's opportunities on that front to increase trade going to India on smaller farm equipment. So I think anytime countries send trade delegations there, and provinces or countries set up trade offices in whether it's India or China, I think it just continues to open doors for producers in Canada.
Yeah, go ahead, Kelvin.
I was just going to say, Lyndsey, I enjoyed your conversation with Greg Cherowick of Pulse Canada this week, and Greg's candidness about the Indian market, and how actually, despite all of this on the diplomatic front, on the political front, Canada's actually been exporting a large amount of yellow peas to India over the last 12 months, and how that's actually a success story there, although potentially at risk with the potential of tariffs being re-implemented on the Indian side at some point here in the coming months.
So, and that I think, and I agree. I really appreciate that Greg will be as available to us and as open with what happens sort of behind the scenes. So I think that was on yesterday's show, talked about the process by which they have to work the communication channels to make sure that when Minister Anand is going to these countries, she knows what she's representing, right? Like she knows the enormity of what this relationship means to Canada. And that I think is just so incredibly important that, these are our representatives, whether you voted for the party or not, this is who represents us when they go to these countries. And it is a lot of work to make sure that your particular commodity, if you're that representative, that the minister ends up with the talking points you want the minister to have. Like that's an incredibly important part. And Marvin, you mentioned, potash, obviously, technology or equipment, energy also to India, and of course, pulses, right? So, and we shouldn't take that for granted. We know though, and Gray sort of alludes to it, that the tariff situation in India is one that is on, like we're used to. We obviously would prefer it not to be an oscillating on-off, but it is sort of the anticipation. And Greg sort of, communicates that, like, that's the kind of thing that Minister Anand needs to know, is that, there might be product that's at port or on the water that, like, needs the certainty to know that it can be delivered to India at whatever rate is set, and we can't ever sort of let up on that. He also mentioned, and I want to shift gears a bit to the China question as well. So, and I apologize to all pulse producers that it does seem like so much of the ag lens has been on canola and China's tariffs on canola. And I mean, for good reason. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but the pulse market in China is a significant one, especially on the pea side. And it's one that, like, Canada has done a ton of work in getting them to choose Canadian pulses for their starch and for their protein, starch first and then protein. And that is one that, Marvin, maybe I'll go to you on this first, that I don't know that we've had as much focus of this. Like, there's 100% tariff on peas right now into China as well.
Yeah, there's been zero focus. Like, the media attention has all been on canola. And it's you don't hear anything about the other tariffs. So yeah,
it's, and I mean, I understand. Like, I think Greg said it's 700 million a year into China for peas. So I mean, obviously not the same level of canola, but that's a lot of peas going into China. Kelvin, as you mentioned, Minister Anand heading to China as well. We also heard this week that China, openly said, remove the EV tariffs and, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Do you think that's true? And is it that simple?
Oh, I think it's true from what the Chinese ambassador said, that they would lift the agricultural tariffs if Canada lifted its EV tariffs. But unfortunately, I don't think it is that simple. We, of course, the premiers here in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, have been vocal again this week, saying, "Hey, federal government, let's do this. Our canola industry is being threatened here and being hurt here at the expense or in exchange for this EV industry that doesn't even really exist yet." And so, yeah, it is complicated because of the relationship with the U.S. has to be factored into all of this, because if Canada lifts its EV tariffs, what's the U.S.'s action against Canadian exports into the U.S.? And of course, the U.S. is our largest customer, and you can't risk some of that stuff happening. So that's where the Carney government and Anita Anand and Minister McDonald in agriculture and others have to walk this line. And I'd be fascinated to see the different scenario analysis that they have in the federal government, or I hope they're running this scenario analysis. Hey, if we do this, what are the consequences and what are the trade-offs? And if all that trade-off analysis right now would be fascinating to see, because we know the canola industry is well established in Western Canada. We know what it's worth to the Canadian economy, and it's significant. And on the EV side of things, a lot of it is up in the air, and there's a lot of what ifs when it comes to these trade relationships right now with the U.S. or with China or with India. All these big players that us as an exporting industry and an exporting country are dependent on.
There's a lot more to say on this one, so I'm going to go to a break, because we also got a backhanded comment from Lutnick about how we aren't allowed to have, apparently, any sort of car manufacturing. But Ontario does factor into this, and so does the car manufacturing sector in Canada. So let's take a quick break, and we'll pick this back up when we get back from the break here on RealAg Radio on Sirius XM.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
Peter Johnson at WheatPeak, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, Help me to learn the Word. Absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host on this Friday, October 17th, Lyndsey Smith. Joining me, Marvin Slingerland with MMP and Kelvin Heppner with Real Agriculture. Okay, where we left it at the break was, of course, this discussion of, China offering, saying, remove your EV tariffs and everything's hunky-dory on the ag side. Now, we also have this province called Ontario that I live in that has an auto sector. Kelvin, I'll go to you first on this one. Stellantis has said that they're pulling up stakes. They're headed to the U.S., which is what the tariffs were designed to do. Ontario gave them a whole bunch of money, so we'll see where that goes. But that is one of the key sort of sticking points here of, one sector versus another versus the fallout of making some of these decisions. I don't think that Premier Ford is about to say, sure, lift the EV tariffs and all those sorts of things.
No, exactly. Ford has been vocal again this week saying we can't lift Canada shouldn't lift the EV tariffs, shouldn't even consider it. And of course, in many ways, you expect him to. He's the Premier of Ontario, and like you said, the auto sector is a huge employer in the province, a huge economic driver. But I don't know how much resistance the Canadian side can continue to put up on this at some point, or I'm not sure. When do we reach a point where the Canadian government or Ontario even has to kind of cut bait on the auto sector? I know that's probably taboo to talk about, especially in central Canada because of how important it is. But if Stellantis leaves or brings production to Illinois or wherever that production was going, there's lots of talk that there are more dominoes to fall then, because parts suppliers and that depend on all these plants remaining in Canada. And so if parts suppliers start leaving, then all of a sudden there's a bunch of dominoes that move, and how much I don't know. I just wonder whether the Carney government at some point has a window to lift the EV tariffs because the auto sector is already on its way south. I'm not sure, but this is where the rubber hits the road with Trump's tariff policy. Agricultural production is going to stay in Western Canada. You can't transport the land and the infrastructure to move it, but auto plants, factories, they can be moved, and that comes with lots of hardship. But and you expect the Premier to continue to defend it, but it's again a balancing act that the Carney government has to navigate here. Yeah,
Marvin, in my mind, there are this to me sort of speaks to the difference of your competitive advantage, right? And the manufacturing that's in Canada largely has it has worked because we had a functional trade agreement with Mexico and with the U.S. Without a functional trade agreement and not knowing what it's going to look like, the auto sector is one, unlike agriculture or mining or some of these other ones, that is portable. So, how does Canada, should we just cut bait here as, sooner rather than later, potentially?
I'd rather nail down a trade agreement first before too many things start moving. But it's really capitalism. Money will flow where investors get the fastest return on their investment, and investors are looking for security and predictability, and companies will make decisions without waiting too long. But it's interesting, and I do not feel jealous for being in the trade minister portfolio right now, because there's so many different decisions to make, and everyone has an adverse effect somewhere. And it's interesting to see now, for as much as Canada was united a year ago, we're starting to see chinks in decisions, right? With whether it's a pipeline going to the coast or tariffs on EVs or canola markets, it's really every province is trying to do what's best for their industry, and the national focus is sort of breaking down a little bit. But hopefully we figure out a trade deal soon.
Mm-hmm. So it is an interesting point, I think. And in the past week to 2 weeks, really, we've seen where this idea of, a united Canada strong, there have been maybe a few cracks in that between, the provinces, especially those that share borders, maybe not getting along potentially as well as maybe we heard. Although, Kelvin, and we mentioned this last week, between Alberta and BC, between Eby and Smith, not a surprise necessarily that this is, it's a relationship full of friction right now. We'll put it that way. But where does this go if at a provincial level, each premier is, going to push for what each province wants and we don't think nationally?
Yeah, well, and that's the big question. And how much is there a willingness at the federal level to push things through if provinces stand in the way? Do provinces have veto power is one of the big questions here. And Carney has tried to please both sides here and keep the provinces happy. But when push comes to shove, is the federal government going to make some of these nation building projects happen? I think that's a huge question. And a good leader can convince people to go a different direction. But yeah.
So I think that this is a key part of this entire conversation is, Marvin, as leadership for Canada. So Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, but our ministers and having a clear vision for what Canada can do or is going to do. It mirrors from a perspective of anyone who's running a business or has to decide, here are all the risks ahead of us. Here's what's in front of us. How do you start to break this down into manageable chunks of what we should be doing as a nation when you're facing adversity? How do we break it down into chunks?
If I was in that position, I would look at where can I get the best return, the fastest return, and have the most impact. And what frustrates me is we've been talking about so many projects for almost a year now. Let's just make a decision and go for it. It's too bad everything takes so long to get the wheels in motion, but I think we need to be decisive and just say these are the two things we're going to do and go for it. And same with the trade deal. I think the longer we drag things out, the more impact we're going to have on, if we look at what's happening in Ontario, if auto dealers or auto manufacturers are looking to move south, we have to make decisions and get something nailed down to stop the unpredictability.
Mm-hmm. Kelvin, we are in the review process for CUSMA. It is not a renegotiation at this point. But we have seen, of course, countries, putting out their, hey, how's this going for you? What are we reviewing? What should we be looking for in the next couple months, potentially, on what a review of CUSMA looks like?
Well, I think we're going to start to hear more from industry stakeholders, first of all, and also from government officials themselves as to what the negotiating positions are. And I think that will start to seep out. And I don't know if there'll be a whole lot of surprises there. It'll be the same old sensitive topics from all three countries. To me, the big uncertain thing here, or question, the big thing to watch for is U.S. withdrawal or signal of the U.S. withdrawing. When Trump, or if Trump wants to play that card, the 6-month notice, that's when the rubber will really hit the road and things will ramp up, heat up in terms of trying to get something in place, because that will put a 6-month timeline on it. In the meantime, even if we don't come to a renewed deal or a agreement coming out of this review on July 1st of next year, this agreement, as it's currently written, remains in effect until 2036.
That's right. Yeah.
It will be reviewed every year going forward until they come to an agreement. But at the same time, it remains in effect unless one of the countries pulls the 6-month trigger on it, and that's where I think things will really ramp up. And so, I'm not sure, based on the Carney-Trump meeting last week, it didn't sound like Trump was anywhere close to talking about pulling out, or as he did with NAFTA, talking about tearing up NAFTA and that type of thing. But that's something that I think we should be watching for. And when the talk of him doing that ramps up, that's when the pressure is really going to be on to get to move ahead on sorting this out, and probably comes with more concessions at that point from maybe from all three countries, but certainly that puts the heat on.
Yeah,
would.
Marvin, from your perspective, do you think that that's in the cards right now? Because as Kelvin points out, it hasn't necessarily been alluded to or threatened or any of those things, like an actual like tearing it up of 6 months out. So it doesn't mean that it happens at all. But what do you think the odds are?
I'm very optimistic something's going to be hammered out here before that happens. And you can sort of sense the change in relationship a little bit with the few encounters last week at various events between Trump and Carney. And I think hopefully there's lots happening behind the scenes that we're not aware of right now.
No one's calling me Marvin, but maybe someone will. Okay.
I'm hopeful too with Marvin. I'm I guess maybe being the pessimistic or the cynic here, but I think optimistically they reach a deal before it gets to that point.
Yeah. Well, but I think, Kelvin, to your point, there is an exit clause in the agreement, right? There has to be. I mean, every agreement can be canceled in some way. And I think it would be pretty naive to think that isn't necessarily used at some point, because it could be. So it's important to recognize that, that is something that could happen. It doesn't mean that we assume that it will. So yeah, I agree. I think we'll have a review and maybe some changes, but I think it will continue. We'll see how it ends up. But as Kelvin, as you pointed out, we still, of course, the same sticking points are there, right? Lumber, steel and aluminum, dairy, the same irritants are still there. And maybe some of them, like the digital sales tax, et cetera, some of those things have gone away, but, yeah.
I'm also maybe less optimistic that we're going to have certainty after a deal, because with Trump, things can change, and the way things work with the White House right now, things can change from one day to the next, and everything is fluid. And so that's where I think that's something that Canadian businesses and industries need to come to grips with, that, and that is one of the concerns about attracting investment in Canada right now, is that certainty is probably still going to be lacking after, there might be a little bit more certainty for a certain amount of time after a deal is signed, but I'm not sure that's something that we should expect to go back to where we were 10, 20 years ago in terms of certainty in making investment decisions like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to park it there for just a moment. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Friday. It is the Issues Panel. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and the future of Canadian food is strong. And FCC is ready to help the next generation of innovators like you with financing tailored to your needs and resources to help you keep growing. To get started, visit fcc.ca/youngfarmer. I think, Kelvin, you're the only one on this panel that would qualify as a young farmer. Maybe not. All right.
Where?
I don't anymore. So.
No.
Yeah. Unless we've changed it to under 50. I think we just keep moving the bar.
Well, that's what I mean. If the average age of farmers keeps climbing, does the average age of young climbing as well? I'm not sure. At some point,
the logic
we've got
checks.
So, the other way, right?
Yeah, exactly. The logic. Okay. A few other things to cover on today's show. Kelvin, next week, You are on a webinar. One of the things with our agreement with CAPI, which I really appreciate, is that we get to participate, host, moderate a monthly webinar. Next week's topic, so this is October 23rd. Anyone who's looking to register, please do. Ag innovation in crisis. Kelvin, is Canadian ag innovation in crisis?
I think that there is probably an argument to be made that we are, but I guess it's something we'll be talking about as part of the webinar next week with Cappy and a good panel of guests. Especially, I think, in light of what we talked about last segment when it comes to certainty and investment drying up. Overall, ag innovation, I think we have seen cuts in terms of investment in R&D, and of course, a lot of the venture capital money has dried up that we saw a few years ago in terms of precision agriculture practices and that type of thing, the hype that there was around it. So broader globally, I think we've seen declines in investment in innovation, but yeah, in Canada specifically, there's a lot of issues, and I think that it's something that it certainly needs attention, and this is something that I know we've talked about here before, but there needs to be, whether it's red tape reduction, whether it's tax policy changes, and actually Prime Minister Carney alluded to some potential corporate tax changes in the budget this week, in the upcoming budget, could be included in that. So things like that to drive investment in innovation in agricultural research and development. I think those are all the types of things that we'll be talking about. So what it takes to get those incentives back in place, because of course we're next door to the U.S., which is this enormous market, 10x in many cases, and so often we see these Canadian companies develop something in Canada and then go south of the border, which is good, but at the same time we want some of that value or the Canadian government and policymakers want some of that value to stay in the country. So yeah, lots to consider and lots to talk about. Well,
and there are so many moving parts to this, but Marvin, from your perspective, like what are the things that could hold back innovation? So, and to me, innovation is solving problems, right? So it's not necessarily just tech or hardware or those sorts of things. Like innovation is services or platforms or all these sorts of things that solve a problem. What in your mind holds us back from potentially, really moving things forward?
So I would say it's either going to be bureaucracy and red tape that holds up the innovation side, and then also lack of adoption that holds up uptake, which decreases the appetite of people to do innovation. So I think I agree with you, Kelvin, on like the big picture, like what's happening, and I think innovation is dropping off a little bit. But I think in the opposite of that is producers also have an opportunity to still innovate on their own personal level. And there's a lot of technologies, a lot of processes, a lot of science that can be adopted on the farm level that has not happened yet. And I think there's still opportunity for Canadian ag producers to move the needle on their own operation. Even though big picture, we're not seeing the advancements that we were a couple of years ago, and the appetite to invest in that sector.
So it's a wonderful point, I think, that we probably don't talk enough about. And although I know we have sort of talked about that technology or innovation really comes in two waves. There's the actual thing or product or innovation itself, and then exactly that, it's the putting it to use where we actually make the gains. We actually leap forward, we increase our productivity, we decrease our costs, we save time, whatever it might be. Yeah. Marvin, when you think about, the clients that you work with that you would consider sort of early adopters, those sorts of things, versus a laggard, and it's not my term, it's the term in adoption rates, but what's the difference between them? What does someone have who wants to do something different and someone who's slow to adopt something? Can you identify anything different between the two that could point to why that is?
Yeah, part of it's the mindset. Some of those early adopters are very curious, forward-looking people. They're also what oftentimes I see is they're business-focused people where they say, okay, we can do this and we can increase our margin by X. And that just moves them to the next level where they can buy that more expensive land as well. And it's, you have to get into the mindset of nothing's ever going to be perfect when you start adopting technology, and you have to try it, and you might have to pivot and do something different, but it's just that appetite to make your operation better.
Mm-hmm. I think I've identified why I struggle at times to change things, and it's the patience part. I have zero. I have less than zero patience. Yeah. Kelvin, does that ring true for you? Like, do you see the people that you know, or even within your own farm, is it having the time and the curiosity to want to implement something? What is the difference between someone who changes and adopts something and a laggard?
Yeah, well, I think it is perspective often too, whether somebody can get through that tough initial phase where it either takes more time to learn or takes more money, and you're actually losing money maybe the first 3 years or 5 years that you invest in a technological change or different practice, that type of thing. So it's the ability to see the return on investment, maybe when other people don't see the return on investment, and so not every farm. Some farms operate on quite a short-term horizon because they have to financially to get from 1 year to the next, and that also limits the ability to implement new technology. And that's something that I wonder too, with a downturn on the crop side of things, whether there will be as much patience, whether it's mentally or whether it's financial patience, that farms can actually show in terms of implementing and trying different practices or spending more money on a technology that has a potential ROI 10 years down the road, that type of thing. So it's certainly an issue that I think the entire industry and is facing. These are the times where R&D and investment in innovation could move us forward, but at the same time, if people are cutting back on spending, then it's tough to justify those investments.
I will also share that one of the benefits of a lot of innovation is saving time. And we don't always actually value our time with like a cash value, right? Yeah. So sometimes it's like, it seems intangible, but realistically, to me, again, that is sort of a perspective of, okay, if you save an hour every day because X, what could you be doing with that hour that would make you more money or maybe gain you more yield or whatever, right? So maybe it's not a cash payout difference because of your time, but it's that mindset of like, okay, where else could I invest that hour that might give me a cash cost kind of thing. So that is one of the ones that I think I struggle with is how do you account for your time when something saves you time? Marvin, go ahead.
Yeah. And it's not an issue that's unique to agriculture. Like every business is facing the same issue. Like even us internally with our business, it's hard to change and it's hard to focus time on change where you get the benefits later and you get into your rhythm and your pattern and it's hard to break habits.
Yeah. Well, or, it's hard to, I think that's a key part is carving out the time to learn whatever the change is, right? And so probably that means setting yourself up for success, meaning don't do it during like seeding or harvest, right? Like pick a time of year where you're going to, learn, whether it's, some sort of new software for the seeder, let's say, or the planter, like learn it in like February, March. Don't do it in April because there's just too much of a time crunch. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the time component is probably a really important one. Okay. We're out of time for today's show. This is just absolutely flown by. And we are here. We've got another week though. Or so before everyone has to decide on their Halloween costumes. So please, everyone, do that. Kelvin, I think, is going as a Blue Jays fan. Anyway, I have to start thinking about these things because I have oodles of children. But I did want to just quickly, before I let you all go, Marvin, what are your plans for the weekend?
Flying to Toronto for the AGM. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see. Okay. Airport viewing of games. Kelvin, are you going to be stuck to the TV?
Oh, we'll try to catch the games, whether we're watching at home or at the hockey rink. We've got a busy weekend of hockey as well. So,
tis the season. Be good. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
We're trying to figure out who's headed on the road trip to Flin Flon this weekend. We've got Flin Flon. So
I would like everyone to Google where Flin Flon is. Please and thank you. It is okay. Hard to watch a game when you're driving to or from Flin Flon. There you go. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on RealAg Radio. If you want to get in touch, 1-855-776-6147 is our text line. You can call, but you can also text, and I love that. Of course, check us out, RealAgriculture.com. All of our stories are there as well. And I will be back Monday for Agronomy Monday. Cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.